The enemy doesn't attack the weak. He attacks the ones who are waking up. A narcissist doesn't hate your weakness. They fear your strength. Because when you begin to see yourself through God's eyes, not their lies, that's when they start to tremble. When a narcissist sees you as being too strong, they don't see inspiration. They see opposition. Narcissists are not drawn to strength. They're threatened by it. This is the truth so many overlook, especially when you're growing, healing, and rising into your purpose. When you begin to rebuild your life, rewire your mind, and recover your identity, it unsettles them deeply. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're finally doing something you right on. And that right thing, that strength, becomes the very reason they feel the need to interfere. At the heart of narcissism is a deep, unhealed insecurity masked by a facade of superiority and control. They build their identity not on self-awareness, but on domination. Their power thrives in environments where others doubt themselves. But when you begin to heal, when you begin to know who are in Christ, or even just who you are without their influence, that's when the real battle begins. Your emotional independence is not just a shift to them, it is a threat to their fragile sense of control. This is why narcissists do not fear your brokenness. They fear your healing. They do not fear your confusion. They fear your clarity. Because when you are broken, confused, dependent, and unsure, you're easy to mold. You look to them for validation, for permission, for emotional direction. That dynamic feeds their ego and maintains their illusion of control. But the moment you rise, the moment you say no more, I deserve better, or I'm walking away, something inside them reacts violently, not always outwardly, but internally, with resentment, rage, and an almost obsessive desire to pull you back into their web. They may not lash out at first. Often they'll start subtly, undermining your growth with backhanded compliments, sarcastic comments, and manufactured doubt. They'll remind you of your failures, minimize your progress, and paint your new confidence as arrogance. That you've changed, they'll say. Not because you've become worse, but because they can no longer manipulate you the same way. And while some may wonder why a narcissist wouldn't celebrate the positive changes in someone they supposedly love or care about, the answer is simple. Celebrating you means admitting they were wrong about you. It means letting go of control. It means seeing you as an equal, or worse, someone who's moved beyond their reach. To a narcissist, strength in others diminishes their perceived power. They crave relationships where they are the center, the authority, the one who decides what is acceptable and what isn't. But your strength, the one built in the secret place, the strength forged in the fires of rejection, disappointment, and spiritual awakening, is not for their approval. It's the evidence that you've survived what was meant to destroy you. That kind of strength doesn't need applause. It simply is late, and it radiates in a way that threatens people who depend on your weakness to sustain their false identity. Let's be clear, narcissists are not the enemy. The spirit behind narcissism is. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, the Bible says, but against principalities and spiritual darkness. The enemy knows that when you discover who you really are, you become unstoppable. That's why narcissists are often used as vessels for emotional warfare. They say the right things to keep you doubting. They stir your emotions just enough to keep you second-guessing your decisions. They mask abuse as concern, manipulation as love, control as care. But you must see through it, because once you begin to see yourself not through their eyes, but through God's eyes, everything changes. You realize you are not broken, you were broken down. You realize you are not crazy, you were being gaslit. You realize you are not hard to love. You were being conditioned to believe love had to be earned by pleasing others and silencing yourself. And when you come to that realization, when you finally grasp that your strength is not a flaw but a gift, you will also understand when they tried so hard to keep it buried. Because your strength is a mirror, reflects the emptiness of their manipulation. It reveals their own lack of control. It dismantles the illusion they worked so hard to build. So when a narcissist sees you as too strong, don't be surprised if they escalate. But don't be discouraged, because what they see as a threat is actually your testimony in progress. And what they fear in you is exactly what God is about to use for something greater. Growth is a beautiful thing, but not everyone will see it that way, especially not a narcissist. When you begin to rise above the pain, the manipulation, and the self-doubt that once weighed you down, something in them doesn't celebrate. It reacts. Your growth exposes their insecurity. It challenges their carefully constructed illusion of superiority, and that exposure, that shift in power, unsettles them in a way that can turn even more toxic. See, a narcissist doesn't need you to stay broken for your sake. They need you to stay broken for good themselves. Your healing reflects what they have refused to face in themselves. Your clarity brings a mirror to their confusion. Your confidence becomes a spotlight on their deep-rooted fear of being seen for who they really are. That's the core of it. When you grow, you make it harder for them to hide. Your transformation disrupts the script they had written for your role in their life. They liked you quiet, unsure, always seeking their approval. It kept the power in their hands. But when you begin to walk in your purpose, when your voice gains strength, when your boundaries get firmer, they feel exposed. Not because you're doing anything to harm them, but because you're no longer vulnerable in the same ways. You're no longer giving them the emotional supply they once fed off of. You've stopped shrinking yourself to make room for their ego. And here's what many don't realize: narcissists often build their entire self-worth on comparison. They gauge their value not by who they are, but by how much more they can appear to be in contrast to others. So when someone they've controlled starts to rise, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, it becomes a threat to their very identity. It's not just jealousy. It's survival. Their false image starts to crack. That's why they suddenly change the tone. They go from flattering to critical, from praising your achievements to picking them apart. At first, they might even try to copy your growth, acting like they're evolving too. But it's shallow, not from a place of transformation, but imitation. Because the truth is, your real growth reminds them of their inner stagnation. You didn't just change your habits. You change your you-harpet, your you-mindag, and your eb-standard. That kind of change can't be faked. Eventually, they'll try to bring you down, subtly or directly. They might question your motives. You think you're better now, or sow doubt into your progress. Let's see how long this lasts. Their words may seem casual, but they're loaded with a desperate need to reestablish dominance. Why? Because your growth makes them feel small. It robs them of the one thing they've depended on, being the one in control. Sometimes they'll even try to re-enter your life, not because they've changed, but because they sense you have. And they'll try to adjust to your new level, pretend they support your healing. But watch closely, their support often has strings. They'll only celebrate your victories when they can claim credit. They'll only admire your strength when it still benefits them. The moment it doesn't, the mask slips. But this is where you must stay rooted. Just because your growth makes someone uncomfortable doesn't mean you need to shrink back. Not everyone is meant to go where you're going. Some people were part of your survival season and not your thriving one. And when God starts revealing your purpose, He also starts removing what can't go with you, including narcissists who once held power over your peace. Your growth isn't selfish. It's sacred. It's the proof that you've been through the fire and come out refined, not ruined. It's not your job to make others comfortable with your healing. It's your calling to walk in the wholeness you fought so hard to gain. So when your growth triggers someone else's insecurity, especially a narcissist, let that be confirmation, not condemnation. You're doing something right. You're breaking cycles, rewriting the narrative, and stepping into your God-given strength. Let them feel exposed. That's not your burden. You're not responsible for hiding your light so someone else can feel tall in the shadows. Keep growing, keep healing, keep moving forward. Because the further you go in truth, the smaller their lies become. Your identity is the foundation of your life. It shapes how you love, how you lead, how you see yourself, and how you allow others to treat you. Narcissists know this. That's why they so much time trying to control the way you see yourself. They do it through manipulation, subtle criticism, comparison, guilt, and emotional confusion. All tools to shape your identity into something they can manage. But here's the truth that breaks their control. Above, your identity is not found in their opinion. It's grounded in God's truth. This is what changes everything. When a narcissist loses control over how you see yourself, they begin to lose control over your life. They want you to believe that you're too much and never enough at the same time, that you're too emotional, too needy, too sensitive. And yet somehow, not worthy of love, respect, or even basic kindness. It's a twisted cycle designed to wear you down and confuse you until you question your worth. But that confusion ends the moment you stop looking to the narcissist and start looking to God, because God doesn't define you by how someone treated you. He doesn't assign your value based on someone's inability to love you properly. He calls you chosen, loved, forgiven, and free. He calls you His child, fearfully and wonderfully made. And once you start to internalize what is the truth about you, the lies of a narcissist begin to fall apart. This is why narcissists fear spiritual growth. They fear emotional healing. They fear you gaining clarity, because clarity is power. It opens your eyes to the manipulation you once thought was love. It helps you see that their approval was a cage, not a gift. That the love they offered was conditional and controlling. That their concern was rooted in fear of losing control, not care for your well-being. But God's truth is not conditional. It doesn't waver based on how well you perform. It doesn't disappear when you say no, set boundaries, or walk away from abuse. God's truth about you is consistent, unshakable, and eternal. When you stand in that truth, you become untouchable in ways that deeply threaten the narcissist's ability to dominate you emotionally. You no longer need their validation. You no longer bend under their disapproval. You no longer feel obligated to make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger. You see yourself differently, and that is something they cannot reverse once it begins. Narcissists often play the role of God in people's lives. They set the emotional temperature. They decide what's right or wrong. They define loyalty, twist accountability, and demand obedience. But when the real God enters the scene, the one who brings peace, wisdom, truth, and identity, the narcissist's control starts to crumble. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen. Isaiah 5:17 says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." That includes emotional weapons. That includes word curses, character assassination, silent treatments, gaslighting, and blame shifting. Those weapons may form. They may come close, but they will not prosper when your identity is rooted in truth. Because when you know who you are, you don't buy to false narratives anymore. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to speak up without guilt and to walk away without shame. You begin to realize that you're not selfish for protecting your peace. You are wise. You realize that you are not heartless for enforcing boundaries. You are healthy. You realize that love doesn't mean tolerating manipulation. It means walking in truth, even when it costs you approval. The narcissist may see your strength and call it rebellion. They may call your healing arrogance. They may call your discernment overreaction. But you know better now. Because God doesn't call you a problem. He calls you a you promise Abe. So don't shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. Don't silence your voice to keep peace that was never real. You don't sacrifice your identity for the illusion of belonging. You already belong to the one who made you, sees you, and calls you worthy. Let that truth be your foundation. Let it be your shield. Because when your identity is in God, not in a narcissist's opinion, you are finally free. Narcissists are unpredictable, but not in the way you might think. Their patterns follow a logic, a twisted logic, rooted in control, fear, and insecurity. The moment you begin to shift, to grow, to heal, they shift too, but not out of support or celebration. Instead, they adjust their tactics. What once worked on you no longer does, and that threatens them. So they pivot, they adapt, and while their tactics will shift, one thing remains constant. The AMA, God's protection over your life. You may have noticed this before. In the early stages, the narcissist might have used charm, flattery, and love bombing to pull you in.
They gave you everything you ever wanted to hear. You felt special, chosen, but it wasn't real. It was a setup. Once you were emotionally invested, the cycle began. The affection faded.
The criticism crept in. Your boundaries became the problem. Your independence was now disobedience. Your opinions were threats. And whenever you pushed back, they shifted again into the victim, the silent one, the martyr, all to make you question yourself. But something happens when you begin to wake up. When you finally say, this isn't love, or I can't keep living like this. When you stop making excuses for their behavior. When you realize the pattern and start breaking free.
That's when they switch gears once again. The new tactic may be rage, it may be manipulation, it may even be pretending to change. But no matter how they move, you don't have to be afraid. Why?
Because God's protection isn't reactive, it's proactive. He sees the schemes before they're even set in motion. He knows every thought in their mind, every word before it's spoken, every plan before it unfolds, and he has already provided a way of escape. Doesn't mean the narcissist won't try to hurt you. It doesn't mean they won't lie or manipulate or recruit others to believe their side of the story. But it does mean the AU will not wing. They may form the weapon, but the weapon will not prosper. That's not a hope. That's a promise. Straight from Isaiah 5:17. When you're under God's protection, you can walk into the fire and not be consumed. You can be surrounded by lies and still walk in truth. You can be the target of slander and still maintain your integrity. Because your covering doesn't come from people, it comes from God. And His shield is stronger than any attack they can launch against you. This is why you don't need to respond to every insult. You don't need to defend yourself against every rumor.
You don't need to prove your side of the story to people who have already chosen not to see the truth. Instead, you stand still and let God fight for you. Exodus 14:14 says, the Lord will fight for you.
You need only to be still. That doesn't mean be passive. It means be grounded, be rooted. Don't react emotionally every time they switch tactics. Don't lose your peace trying to win their approval. Don't fall into their trap of making you feel like you have to explain your worth. You are already worthy. You are already protected. You are already chosen. When a narcissist senses that they're losing control, their attacks may get louder, more desperate, even more dangerous. But that's often a sign that they know they've lost their grip. And if they've lost control over your mind, your emotions, and your sense of identity, then the battle is already shifting in your favor. So don't be discouraged when their tactics shift. Let it be confirmation. It means your healing is working. It means your strength is growing. It means they can't manipulate you the way they used to. And most of all, it means you're walking in the protection of a God who sees the end from the beginning. You are not alone in this fight, even when it feels like no one understands, no one sees, no one believes you. My God does that, and He is not passive about your pain. He's not silent about your suffering. He is active, present, and He is working behind the scenes in ways you may not see yet, but you will. So when the narcissist changes their tactics, let them. You don't have to change your truth. God's protection will remain steady and unshakable, no matter what form the attack takes, and that's what gives you the strength to keep moving forward, free and fearless.
Sometimes strength doesn't look like standing up and shouting your truth. Sometimes strength looks like walking away silently, without anger, without explanation, and without a need for closure.
One of the most powerful things you can do in life is to walk away from a narcissist in truth. Not to hurt them, not to win, but because you finally realize your peace is no longer up for negotiation. That's what true victory looks like. It's not revenge, it's release, but narcissists thrive on conflict, confusion, and emotional chush. They keep you tangled in a cycle of highs and lows, push and pull, guilt and praise. As long as you're reacting, they feel in control. As long as you're arguing, explaining, justifying, or defending, they know they still have emotional access to you. And that's what they crave most. Access, not connection, not reconciliation, need but control. When you walk away without needing to explain yourself, without trying to prove your worth, and without begging them to understand your heart. You remove their ability to manipulate you. You are no longer playing the game. And to a narcissist, that is the greatest loss of all. Because now they can't provoke a reaction, they can't twist your words, they can't blame you for the distance. You're no longer part of the cycle, and that terrifies them. But getting to that point takes deep inner work. It takes time, healing, and often pain, because narcissists don't just take your peace. They try to rewrite your reality. They gaslight you into doubting your own memory. They make you question your motives, your instincts, even your sanity. And for a while it works. You stay not because you don't see the red flags, but because you've been made to believe they're somehow your fault. But then one day something shifts. It might be a word, a moment of silence, a feeling that you can't ignore anymore. A still, small voice that says, "This isn't love." And when you begin to listen to that voice, not the narcissist's voice, not the fear, not the doubt, but that voice of truth deep in your soul, you begin to break free. You start to reclaim your identity. You stop arguing with someone who never wanted to understand you in the first place. You realize that you don't have to stay in places that drain you just to prove you're loyal. That love doesn't require pain as pros. And slowly you begin to choose peace over drama, clarity over confusion, and freedom over familiarity. Walking away in truth doesn't mean you're bitter. It doesn't mean you hate them. It simply means you love yourself enough to stop negotiating your worth. It means you've decided that being alone in peace is better than being together in chaos. That you'd rather face healing than stay in a toxic cycle. And that you no longer accept love that asks you to betray yourself. And here's where the real power comes in when you walk away. You don't just break free from the narcissist, you break a abuse cycle, you break generational patterns, you disrupt dysfunctional dynamics, you send a message to your future self, your children, your soul, that you are no longer available for manipulation. You draw a line in the sand and say, "This ends with me." You begin to build a life based on truth, not fear. You surround yourself with people who see you, hear you, and respect your boundaries. You rediscover joy in the small things. You sleep better. You breathe deeper. And while the narcissist may try to pull you back with guilt, manipulation, or fake apologies, you've reached a place they can't reach anymore. You've chosen truth, and that truth has set you free. So never underestimate the strength it takes to walk away. It is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is courage. It is spiritual clarity. Because sometimes the most anointed, most powerful move you can make is not to fight harder, not to explain louder, but to walk away. Quietly, confidently, completely, and let peace be the loudest sound you leave behind. That is real victory. And that is freedom. That is a future the narcissist can no longer touch.